I'm sure opposing counsel will talk all about the free breakfast program for community children and the Educate to Liberate program, serving as a space for educating youth about the current condition of the Black community. Or was this one of those business schemes in an effort to enlist and embed a notion of hatred towards authority to tomorrow's youth, wrapped up inside of a facade of the business of helping our people? It's no secret that drug dealers and hardened criminals prey on inner city youth to show an exterior of benevolence in order to later cash in on their return once the children reach adulthood. Now, I want you to take note of the phrase, our people, because the Black Panther Party makes it a point to systematically use rhetoric to show inferiority and supremacy over other races as well as authorities. Now, let's look into these words spoken by the domestic terrorist Fred Hampton. I am the people. I'm not the pigs. You got to make a distinction, and the people are going to have to attack the pigs. The people are going to have to stand up against the pigs. That's what the Panthers are doing here. That's what the Panthers are doing all over the world. End quote. I believe it was David Duke. I'm sure you're familiar with Mr. Duke. He was the grand wizard and poster child of a little-known group called the Ku Klux Klan. You know the Ku Klux Klan, a domestic terrorist organization who through the years of good PR and political power have been able to morph and mold and gain notoriety and membership due to its propagandist rhetoric and place in the history books. Now, if only we could have cut their microphone off years ago, they wouldn't think this behavior was acceptable. Anyway, now Mr. Duke is quoted as to saying, our clear goal, the KKK, must be the advancement of the white race. Now let's put on our thinking caps. This sounds a lot like member Fred Hampton's words. However, he's not only wanting the advancement of his people, but he also wants his people to destroy the pigs. And the state will show what the definition of pig in the Black Panther Party language is later. But spoiler alert, the pigs are white and they are policemen. Finally, the founder of the Black Panther Party, Huey Newton, said, there is no reason for the establishment to fear me, but it has every right to fear the people collectively. I am with the people. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, history has shown us that fringe beliefs and dog whistle rhetoric give form to ignorance and breathes a life of hatred, disdain, and insurrection. And if this organization represents the people for whom believe in dying for the cause, you deserve no moment, no time, and no voice in a history more than a white supremacist or religious extremist that will commit suicide to ensure genocide. The Black Panther Party is going to try to persuade you with their 10-point manifesto of demands. But to that I say, the United States does not negotiate with terrorists. Now, we would like to enter into the court judicial notice. And a little bit about judicial notice. Judicial notice is a rule of law and evidence that allows a fact to be introduced into evidence if the truth of that fact is so notorious or well known or so authoritatively attested that it cannot be reasonably doubted. So, for instance, Hurricane Katrina was one of the most deadliest storms in American history. That's an undisputed fact. Or Al-Qaeda was behind September 11th. These are undisputed facts. So the first judicial notice piece of evidence that I want to submit to the court, I want you to take a look at this memo from counterintelligence on September 27th. All right, there it is. If you'll take a look, this is a memo from counterintelligence. If you look at that blue highlighted portion, it basically says that this is the most violence-prone organization of all the extremist groups now operating in the United States. This group has a record of violence and connections with foreign revolutionaries. It puts particular emphasis on not only verbal attacks, but also physical attacks on police. We would like to introduce this into judicial notice to show that the Black Panther Party is a violent group. That's just the first thing. They are a violent group. Now, our next piece of evidence that we will be entering is Black Panther member Assata Shakur. She is a most wanted terrorist. Assata Shakur, aka Assata Shakur, Joanne Byron, aka Barbara Odoms, aka Joanne Chesterman. The list goes on. This woman has changed her aliases many times. She is a very dangerous member, and this exemplifies what the Black Panther Party's members have become. They are violent, and this right here shows their member, not only that the Black Panther Party is a dangerous organization, but it breeds violent members. Can we go on to the next exhibit? This is our final exhibit that we are offering to the court. Capitol is invaded. Ladies and gentlemen, the Black Panther Party, before there was an insurrection this year in 2021, the Black Panther Party actually were the first to do it when they were protesting on the Capitol, basically invading the Capitol. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have entered evidence showing that the Black Panther Party has been violent. They breed violent members, and they have invaded the headquarters of America, which, I mean, some could say is the beginning of what an insurrection is and what they have done this year. So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we ask that you take all this evidence into consideration, and we look forward to hearing what the defense has to say. Thank you.
Your evidence has been accepted by the court.
Thank you so much.
May it please the court, Your Honor, to the state and to the men and women of the jury. The state would have you to believe that my clients, members of the much aligned Black Panther Party, are a group of domestic terrorists. I mean, let's think about that for a second. Throughout its history, America has been no stranger to all of the domestic terrorists, racist militias, and anti-government radicals that she can muster. We haven't forgotten about the Confederates of the Deep South who started their own government and broke off from the Union, starting a civil war. We haven't forgotten about Timothy McVeigh, who in 1995 killed 168 people and injured 680 more. It hasn't been forgotten. We can't forget about the carnage that was brought upon the World Trade Center during the 9/11 attacks. No real deep scan of America's history is needed for other examples of homegrown terrorists, when we can look back only a month ago, when we witnessed the atrocious, violent, and unruly pack of thugs under the guise of being so-called patriots, who mounted an insurrection against 1/3 of our nation's government, wreaking havoc in the hallowed halls of our Capitol building. We're not confused. We know a domestic terrorist, an anti-government radical, a racist militia when we see it. The Louisiana alumni chapter of the Black Panther Party is nothing of the sort, and I will prove that today. The state would have you to believe that the use of the term pig by the Black Panther Party is somehow indicative of the Panthers being a hate group. Admittedly, the term pig was used to label police officers, whether white or black, whenever they were disrespectful in their approach to the Black community. The label was applied blanketly, whether their skin tone was black or white, to any enemy of the party, despite their race or profession, who tried to stand in the way of the Panthers' mission of bringing power to the people. The honorable men and women of the Black Panther Party were governed by a 10-point plan. The 10-point plan called for such things as freedom, employment, an end to robbery by the capitalists of Black and oppressed communities. They wanted decent housing and an education that taught Black folk their true history and role in society. The Black Panther Party wanted all Black men to be exempt from military service and an immediate end to police brutality and murder of Black people. They sought freedom for all Black men who were held in federal or state, county, and city prisons and jails. And for those who were brought to trial, they wanted them to be tried by a jury of their peer group, by people from the Black community, as defined by the Constitution of the United States of America. Finally, they desired land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, and peace. The Black Panther Party was looking for change in a hopeless situation that Black communities were facing day in and day out. President Obama told us that the best way to not feel hopeless is to get up and do something, not to wait for good things to happen to you. If you go out and you make some good things happen, you will fill the world with hope. You will fill yourself with hope. Ladies and gentlemen, today you will hear from some of the men and women of the Louisiana alumni chapter of the Black Panther Party who were those change agents that President Barack Obama told us about. If they were so lawless, so anti-government, so radical, why would they submit to the authority of this court as they have done too many times in too many courtrooms across America? The Black Panther Party was founded by a law student and a college student who loved the United States, who loved the Constitution, and wanted to see it be respected for all races. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I want you to listen to the facts of this case carefully. These brave Panthers will tell you exactly who they are. They profited nothing, yet they have sacrificed so much and quite frankly suffered too much. I will prove these things through their testimony, coupled with official records and reports. The only crime is loving their community and believing in the power of the people. Tragically, I will also show you that the infrastructure that neutralized them remains in place today. Founder Bobby Seale once said, "You don't fight racism with racism. The best way to fight racism is with solidarity." Co-founder Huey Newton, he said, "I think what motivates people is not great hate, but great love for other people." Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I ask you, which manner of domestic terrorist groups, of all the examples that America has proffered over the years, would make such a profound, loving, and honorable statement as these? I submit to you not one of them, which is why my clients shall be proven to be not guilty of this most heinous accusation. I yield the remainder of my time to the court by asking the court to accept the entire COINTEL file, along with the gun barrel politics report and the church committee congressional report into evidence, Your Honor.
Your evidence is accepted.
Thank you. I ask that the court display the August 67 file. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what you are looking at right now is a piece of evidence that is from a memo which was created by the top brass of the FBI on August 25th, 1967. It was sent out to all of the offices of the FBI, introducing what is called a new counterintelligence program, or COINTELPRO. As you can see from the evidence admitted, the purpose of this endeavor was to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize the activities of the Black Panther Party or anyone that was affiliated with the Black Panther Party. I now ask that the court would display the February 68 file. Ladies and gentlemen, here on February 29th, 1968, just 6 months after starting all of this counterintelligence, J. Edgar Hoover and the government felt as if it was not enough. In this memo, Hoover stepped up the involvement of field offices in this operation from 23 offices to 41, almost double the capacity. He did it, according to the evidence presented, to prevent the rise of a leader who might unify and electrify what they considered to be a Black nationalist group that could gain respect amongst America's youth. Now, Your Honor, I would like to call my first witness, Malik Rahim. Mr. Rahim, tell us about the size of the New Orleans Black Panther Party chapter in comparison to the other chapters around the country.
Excuse me for a second. You trying to? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
The difference between the chapter here and the chapter in the rest of the country is first the things that they had to persevere. It was a group of kids. You know, we wasn't 70-year-old men. I was 22 and I was one of the oldest. It's the work that we did in the community, establishing of programs, of making sure that we made people understand the importance of capitalism, scope, equal genocide. How can we deal with the drug problem? In New Orleans, when we started, if a person wanted to kick, they was able to come into our office. We would set them in there and deal with them while they beating this addiction. That's how a couple of people became members. Making sure that the community was clean. You did doing the first cleanup, telling individuals that, yeah, if it's wrong for you to sell dope, it's wrong for you to have to sell dope. But don't sell it around these kids. The first drug-free zone. These are the things that made the people supported us to the degree that when the police came to raid us for the second time, the community surrounded our office and wouldn't let them come in. How they finally made the raid? By posing as priests, by wearing priest outfit that was given to them by Loyola University. You dig? And after all that they said that we had done, when we took it to court, the jury took only a half an hour to find us innocent on all charges.
Thank you for that, Mr. Rahim. Let me ask you a question about that. Can you share with us what you recall about the infamous shootout in the Desire?
Well, I'm a spiritual person, so I have to tell you and share it to you in a spiritual perspective. The shootout happened on September the 15th. 7 years earlier, on September the 15th, was the Birmingham bombing. So on our shootout happened on the 7th anniversary of it. On the evening of the 14th, a lady from out of the Desire Project came to us and prayed and put a cloth on the building and said, if anybody pray, ain't nothing gonna happen to y'all. That next morning, 120 police shot at us for over 20 minutes, and not one of us was injured. We walked out of there, and then 11 months later, we was found not guilty in a half an hour. This happened at a time that the city said they had no money for program. But by the time of the first shootout to the second shootout, the city had the time to buy a tank. Now this is for kids. You know, I mean, what did we do? We made the design, and I'll tell you, from then on, it's never been a safer period in that design housing project than when we was there. It's never been. With all the funds that they have put in that, they have never been able to reduce the crime the way we did. And we didn't do it by no other way than being there for the people, showing programs in solidarity with. Not going in there to lead them, but in solidarity. How we can address the social ill. You dig? It wasn't an idea of no gun. Now, yeah, we had guns, but that's for self-defense. We have a right to carry guns. That's the reason why the Panthers went into the courthouse, into the Capitol in Sacramento. Because it was all the way up until Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seals came together and formed the Black Panther Party. The police ran amok in Oakland. You dig? And they was all on. But these brothers here said when they start arming themselves in self-defense of our community, using the genius of Huey P. Newton, a young black man who was able to understand the law to say that you have a right to observe police action. You know, and wasn't until then, you dig that all of a sudden the NRA and everybody else was against blacks having arms. So that's the reason why they went in.
Thank you.
It wasn't no. I don't want to go.
I understand. We appreciate that. Let's pivot a little bit. I want to talk about the outcome of your trial. Tell us the conditions that you were held under as you were awaiting. What were the conditions that you were held under as you were awaiting trial?
All of a sudden, this passed. Right.
That's all right. I'm asking about the conditions that you were held under as you was waiting on your trial.
Well, from the time we left this job, we went to court. And then from court at Tulane and Broad, we were sent up to death row. So we was held up on death row until it was too many of us to keep on death row. And then we spent the rest of the time in the dungeon. And we stayed there, and there we continued the work that we was doing. But it was the harshest time in my life, but it was the best time.
Wow.
Because I fell in love with us.
What I'm hearing you tell the court is that you were held on death row while you were waiting for trial?
Oh, yes.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Why did black activists use white lawyers so much during the civil rights era? I mean, were there a shortage of black lawyers?
Everything happened. One of the greatest blessings as the Most High have blessed my family with is the two black lawyers, three, Cotton, Ernest Jones, and most of all, Lois Eli. I seen what we was able to do. Because I seen how they handled our case. So when I look at Lowe's, sometimes even though it may be what I'm about to say, maybe I don't know how you could take it, but when I look at the judge, Angela Bell, I think of Lowe's Sea Line. When I look at Justin and some of the other students, I think of what we need for brothers that have been blessed to become lawyers. To understand the importance that our community cannot fight this battle without those representing us through these litigations that we have to be faced with. Again, we need individuals. I know this, that if the Black Panther Party was still in existence, this black on black violence would nowhere be to the level that it is in now. And I challenge anyone to look at what we did in design, how it was lowered, to show me where it was ever done again. That was the uniqueness of our chapter. We had great things in other chapters, but it was always because of what we was doing in the community. All the way until the Panther Party, if you was from the design, you didn't go into the St. Thomas. You didn't go into the Callio. You dig? For the second shootout, it was brothers from the design surrounding the office that was filled with brothers from the Callio Project. And these brothers had joined the party within weeks. And they had stood there with us. Stood there with the sister that you'll be talking with. Betty Toussaint, or Betty Powell, or either Betty Ellsworth. See what she had done. And Althea Francois after the shootout. These two women with these brothers from the Callio Project reopened the office. This never happened before in this city, where one stood up and did what they had done. You think so? Again, I know I done went off.
That's all right. Thank you. We appreciate that, Mr. Raheem. We thank you. Then there'll be other opportunities. At this time, because you mentioned Ms. Ellsworth, I would like for the court to call Betty Ellsworth to the stand, please. Mrs. Ellsworth, can you tell us about the members of this chapter, perhaps about, like Mr. Raheem alluded to, the ages already, but some of their family connections, the dreams that they may have had, things like that?
That is something but we can't hear.
It's because she probably has her phone removed.
I ask the court to respond to a Betty Ellsworth.
How about if we move on to the next witness and we'll...
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, I would like to call upon Mr. Albert Woodfox. Mr. Woodfox, can you please tell the court what caused you to form the Angola chapter of the Black Panther Party?
Prior to being sentenced, shipped to Angola, I had been involved. My first direct exposure to the Black Panther Party was in New York, and Manhattan House detention known as the Tomb. Eventually, I lost an extradition here, and I was sent back to Orleans Parish Prison. And because of my political activities in New York, I was placed on tier with Brother Malik and some of the other members of the Black Panther Party. as he said earlier, virtually that tier had been a tomb. They had sealed all the windows up with steel plates, and it was a horrible. The conditions were horrible. Lack of, sanitary products. The food was horrible. The way we were constantly treated was horrible. Eventually, the brother in leadership position named Scott, and although I had been exposed to the Black Panther Party in New York, I hadn't actually joined the party. And so I actually joined the Black Panther Party on the tier was C1 and became a member. Because of the corruption and the filth and the institutional racism that was going on, we had decided we had to make a political statement. And that political statement manifests itself in placing under house arrest security guard with his assistant on the tier, and we demanded to see the press. And so to make a long story short, because of those actions, I was shipped to Angola. And prior to leaving, I sat down and talked with Scott, and I wanted to know, what should I do? And his instruction to me was, when you get to Angola, we know there's a lot of problems there. It's your obligation as a Black Panther to educate, organize, and resist, all that's going on in Angola. So when I got to Angola, I went through some trials and tribulations in what's called orientation. And I was beaten and placed in the dungeon because of my political beliefs and my advocacy for empowerment of Black prisoners. And eventually, I was put in the population. And a health issue called the camp where Harmon Wallace was being housed to be shut down, and they moved him into what's called a walk area in which I was housed in. And so I was already active in, advocating the philosophy and the beliefs of the Black Panther Party for self-defense. And so Harmon, he joined in, and at some point, we figured that to be more effective, we had to give those men on the walkway an identity. So we thought, well, let's form a chapter, a prison chapter. It had never been done before. And so, we contacted Panther officials, and they gave us the okay. So we formed the only prison chapter of the Black Panther Party. And we virtually advocated and carried out the programs and the policies of the party while in prison. And of course, as a result of that, a correctional officer had been found murdered in one of the dormitories. And on April 18th, 1972, I was placed in solitary confinement, which is known as CCR. And I remained there for 44 years. I remained in solitary for 44 years and 10 months.
Wow. Now, you were able to eventually get up out of prison. So let me ask you a question about multiracial coalitions. Is it true that the Panthers believe in multiracial coalitions? And if so, why is this important to activists?
Well, multiracial coalitions, it builds unity, it builds strength, it builds a sense of direction. Usually each ethnic member of the human race have their own culture and stuff. So when members of different ethnic groups come together, then you form a new culture, you form a new purpose, a new direction, and it makes it easier to become unified and moving in one direction instead of having blacks moving this way, whites moving this way, Hispanics moving that way. You have everyone moving in the same direction, and that is to serve the people and to protect humanity.
Wow, thank you for that. Your Honor, at this time, I would like to check on the status of my previous witness.
She has arrived and she's ready, I'm told.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mrs. Ellsworth, earlier we were talking about family connections and titles within the Black Panther Party. Can you speak to that? Who exactly were the Black Panthers? Your Honor, if she still isn't ready, I can move to my next witness, please.
Would you please?
Thank you. At this time, I would like to call Mr. Robert King to take the stand. Mr. King, good afternoon, sir. Now, you often speak about the law in contrast to morality. Can you enlighten the court on your thoughts about what the difference is?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much, and hello, everybody else. Anyway, I would love to enlighten the difference the people concept on the difference between law and morality, because that which is legal, I have a term that I call, some people believe that if something is legal, then it is morally and it is correct if it's done legally. But there have been cases in life that I've learned to understand that things that are legal are not morally just. And I equate this with race slavery during the Civil War. Slavery at this time was considered an act, but it was an immoral act. It was people who were housed in the lowest of condition, people who were held as slaves, people who were taught as animals, and we allegedly lived in a democracy. So I tried to, along the line, I learned the difference. If a democracy is a democracy, it means one thing. It's people power. A word that comes from Greek, it means people power. It's a democracy. We were a people, totally isolated, black people who were former slaves, who lived in subdivisions, and who were not taking any part at all in this democracy, this people glory. And therefore, there was a whole, after becoming knowledgeable about certain things, I began to realize that there never was, at one time I thought that there was, had been a war, there never was a civil war in this country. There never was a racial war. At one time I thought it was a racial war, or that was a thing that was needed. But I learned along the line that there never was, in fact, a racial war. It was a civil war based on race, certain races who were being degraded. And at the time that we got to a certain point in history where we began to fight, people began to realize that there was a difference between, even though there were laws that said that decreed into the Constitution that blacks would be slaves for the rest of their life or eternally, there were other people on the other side who believed otherwise. And as a result of that, there was a consistent movement. And it does, like I said, the Civil War emerged. And as a result of the Civil War, we were given certain rights. We were given as allegedly the same rights as any other person inside a democracy. If it's people power, we want the same kind of power. So we sought for it, and we act out on it, and we began to assimilate the means and the reason why we should have this power. We showed this, that we are beyond subhuman, that we deserve this. And as a result, they say we have powers. They say this is a democracy. So all right, if it's a people power, then we want this. And I think this is what the Black Panther Party was saying. When they eventually emerged, they were saying that we want land, bread, houses, education, clothes, and justice and peace. In other words, you say that we are free. If we are free, then we deserve to be free. We should have these rights that other people take for granted. And we were not having these rights. I mean, we have a history. History is, replete with, blacks being murdered and slaughtered by groups of whites and people who were white supremacists. And blacks have never, even though it's been alleged that we were, racist, we fought against racism. That's where we could have. That's where we know how. We never hated, and we went across the board, in our association with people who felt like we felt. People who were in solidarity with us. I could name some lawyers earlier that did not have any connection with me during the time, but they had connection with other people who they put their sole intent into. Garrison is one of the lawyers that were during the time. George Jackson speak of the lawyers that he had. The name escapes me right now, but these were people who were in solidarity with people who had people who were looking for the right to live decent as human beings. And this is what we wanted. We wanted, when we say we made the difference, we say, okay, you have us in prison. You say we have moral right, but we are considered slaves. There are laws that are remnants here that are akin to slavery that you use to persecute us and to put us in prison and to keep us in prison and to give us indeterminate amount of time. And we are not supposed to have anything to do with, even though we live in a democracy.
Now
we
Mr.
can't
King,
have access to it.
let me ask you about that, because that's a really good point. Help the jury to understand that by you guys challenging the status quo, how did the powers to be use solitary confinement to try to quash that?
Okay, well, solitary confinement, a lot of people believe that you take it for granted, but solitary confinement was something that was really invented way back, by the Quakers who felt that penitence. The word penitentiary come from that word, penitence and penitentiary. But solitary confinement went on to be used. Originally, the Quakers believed that if a person go into solitary confinement and they're there for penitence, and you put them there for 2, 3, 4 months, that they'll be redeemed of all their crime. But it didn't happen. People went crazy. That experiment lasted for a while, but people went totally crazy. And it wasn't until the system began to utilize it in another form and manner, they started people in solidarity as being a form of punishment and control. And so they used solitary to control people. If you wanted to act out against the system, if you wanted to act out against the injustices that were taking place in prison, solitary confinement was a place where they would put you there and keep you there from now on. And even though you were sentenced there for a number of years to prison, but you end up doing a lot of time in solitary confinement. And like Alfred pointed out, he did 40-some years in solitary confinement. I was there for 31 years for a crime in which I hadn't committed, based on, actually, it was punishment, just because I was affiliated with members of the Black Panther Party, because I became a member of the Black Panther Party. And this is the reason why I was targeted. I was charged with a murder, which I never committed, tried and convicted for it, and placed in solitary confinement. So that is a difference between morality and legality. You could be placed legally in solitary confinement, or you could be placed legally in prison, and you could be legally given the death sentence, and you could be morally innocent of this crime, but nevertheless, being found guilty of this crime, you are accused.
Thank you, sir. Finally, I'm going to ask you one more question. There are several future attorneys that are in the jury on today. What lessons could you give them about lawyering in general?
Well, I do remember speaking to some people who wanted to be lawyers at some point in time. And what I would let them know that there's not a lot of decency. People are frowned upon defense attorneys. Defense attorneys are the worst of the lot to some people, because they have a tendency to plead the case of the poor. And a lot of times they are successful with this. And so I would say this: if you want to be a prosecutor, the prosecutor, once they win a case, they get invited out to dinner. They are gone and have fun, having drinks and what's not with the family members or not. But you let a person the defense attorney, get a defendant off. And he's frowned upon, not just by the system, but by other people who are not even a part of the system. And so there's a distinction there, and I usually make that distinction between, categorizing these things.
Thank you, Mr. King. All right, Your Honor, I ask that Ms. Betty Ellsworth be brought to the stand.
She's having some technical challenges, so if she does not respond when you call her now, would you move on to Ron Allsworth and then Mr. Forbes? They're ready.
Very good, Your Honor. Is Mrs. Allsworth prepared? Thank you. Mr. Allsworth, are you there? Mr. Ron Allsworth.
General Rico Forbes is ready.
Thank you. General Rico.
Yes.
You got involved with the Panthers after watching many of them being arrested or harmed. Why, knowing all of this, did you still decide to join the party?
Well, when I first discovered about the party was in 1968. I was in the Job Corps. And one of the brothers who came from California had bought 2 newspapers of the Black Panther Party and for self-defense. And I liked the idea of self-defense. So after coming back to Louisiana, just after the shootout in both incidents, that I decided to work with the Black Panther Party.
Thank you. And what was the cost of your activism because you decided to work
Well,
with the
basically,
Your Honor, I believe he's muted.
I sent him a message to make him aware of it.
General Rico, I believe you're muted, sir. There we go. So you were talking about your earning potential?
yes, so I joined the Black Panther Party based on self-defense. My activities end up leading me to being incarcerated, bank robbery.
Thank you, sir. And in doing that, one final question for you. After you were released, has anything really changed from the time that you were in prison versus now?
I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't see. I have saw things that got worse. I end up since the dissolve of the Black Panther Party, I end up working with the Republic of New Africa. By working with the Republic of New Africa, I have able to continue the struggle. We advocate to set up our own nation here in America, claiming territory like Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, and South Carolina. The Republic of New Africa was established at the same time, well, right after the Black Panther Party was organized. The Republic of New Africa came into existence in 1968 in Detroit. And what I love the most is that I end up raised up in the ranks to become president of the Republic of New Africa. But last year, we also have a sister-nized president of the Republic of New Africa. She is out of Memphis, Tennessee. But my duties are still the same. I am involved with the military of the Republic of New Africa, known as the Black Legions.
Thank you, General. We appreciate your time and effort. Your Honor, at this time, I would finally like to call expert attorney Ryan Thompson. Good afternoon, Mr. Thompson. Do you see the same pattern by the government in over-sentencing practices being used on present-day activists? Your Honor.
Is Ron Allsworth, Betty Allsworth, or Ron Thompson ready to testify? Ron Allsworth, Betty Allsworth, or Ryan Thompson? It does not appear they have presented themselves today.
Can you hear? Can you hear? Can you hear?
We actually can hear. We are able to hear. Is this both Ron and Betty?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. We're ready for you to testify.
Mr. and Mrs. Ellsworth, good afternoon. At this time, we just want you to give us a couple of statements in regard to your activities with the Black Panther Party. Can you describe those activities for us in a few short minutes, please?
Well, as for myself, I was one of the founding members of the Louisiana chapter Black Panther Party. When my brother came down, my name was Steve Green, and he started the umbrella organization. Now the committee come back faster than I was the first to join. And from there, we ended up in the shootout. I got arrested with the rest of the brothers and sisters. And when they got turned loose on the streets, I was convicted for a bank robbery and sent to the federal prison. And I got out in 1975 and came back to New Orleans and picked up another case, political case, where I did 4 years in Angola. And I've been out now about a year and a half. So since I've been back home, I've just been doing a lot of community work.
Thank you. And since you got back home, from my understanding, you've married Mrs. Betty, correct?
Yes, I married Betty.
Can y'all speak to that and how you guys were able to meet through the Black Panther Party's efforts?
Well, the first time I met Betty was September 14th when we was out on the porch the night for the shootout. And the night we had the trial on the policeman. So after that, I didn't meet Betty again till I was coming through the federal court. I just had got sentenced for 20 years, and Betty was in the holding pen. And I met her again. And the next time I met Betty was on my return back here after 40 years in Angola. And we decided, hook up and get married.
Now, Miss Betty.
Yes.
Any of the members of the Black Panther Party believe in the Constitution of the United States?
I can't speak of what any other people believe, but I'm sure we believe in the Constitution.
Yes, ma'am. Now, also, the question that I would have for you is, what role specifically did women serve in the Black Panther Party?
Well, there was really no difference between the men and the we did the same thing. We pulled security, we cooked, we went out and solicited donations, we went out carrying loads of newspaper to sell them. Breakfast program to the children in the community. We spoke with lawyers. Whatever others here did.
So from what I'm hearing, it sounds as if it was some sort of community effort, correct?
It was an effort.
Thank you. We appreciate your testimony. And at this time, we're going to go back to the expert testimony of an attorney, Ryan Thompson. Are you there, sir?
I am here, sir.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. The question that we would have for you is, do you see this same pattern by the government in over-sentencing practices, use of solitary confinement being done on present-day activists?
I can't speak to the solitary confinement, but I can speak to the government's overcharging or using more than the means that they should to indict, prosecute, current activists. Brother Raheem and others had alluded to this term of Black identity extremists. We have those who are participating in the Black Lives Matter movement, other movements around this country who are exercising their rights, and the government is using all of its resources, state, local, and federal, to hold people accountable, and they're using more than they should to carry out these wishes.
And that brings me to the next question: is how do you see that hand, that federal hand, playing its role in persecuting present-day activists?
I think it's been. I think this is what America's always been, right? I'm not sure if anyone else is under any type of illusion, but we look back to when our ancestors were brought here. That was done via the government. When you look at the role of Jim Crow, when you look at slavery, this was all government institutions that was carrying this out. Currently, I represent one of three individuals who are known as the Baton Rouge Three, who are alleged to have committed arson to property here in Baton Rouge. Those individuals were arrested for those alleged acts for a state crime. They were granted a bond, their constitutional right to a bond, and then we saw the U.S. Attorney's Office then step in and then charge them with arson, as well as interfering with interstate commerce. If anyone knows, particularly law students know about interstate commerce, that rule was created to stop, racist individuals, the Ku Klux Klan and others from discriminating against people of African descent here in this country. And so now they turned the tables to now use that to prosecute one of the three of my clients. Attorney Jessica Hawkins represents another one of the Baton Rouge Three, and another is with another attorney. So yes, that is how that is now currently being played out right here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
One final question for you as an expert. There are many future lawyers in the jury on today. Can you give us an example of how we could be a part of this fight should we choose to become a part of the fight?
I think you've taken the first step, which is go to an institution whose mission statement says that it's either public service, teaching, or research. In my current role, obviously being a lawyer and being involved in the movement, you have to research and know the history in which the footsteps in which you're stepping. A lot of folks, and it's just me speaking personally from my experience, Black folks, particularly Black attorneys, and I'm not trying to deter anyone away from going to any other avenues, but unless we're free, unless our people are truly liberated, then we can't have individuals, our citizens, our community can't fully celebrate themselves in entertainment law. They can't fully celebrate themselves in patent law. Not saying we don't need those attorneys, but unless we have true liberation, meaning that we are free to go wherever we want to go, we can drink Skittles, we can eat Skittles, we can drink teas, we can wear hoodies. I believe that all of our resources as attorneys should be toward the movement, whether it's part-time, full-time, or whatever time you can contribute to that.
Thank you, Attorney Ryan Thompson, for your remarks.
Thank you for having me.
At this time, Your Honor, I have no further witnesses, and I yield to the court.
The court has carefully considered all of today's evidence and testimony. The court has arrived at a verdict in this case against the Louisiana alumni chapter of the Black Panther Party. I will share that verdict after a recitation of my reasoning. When the facts of this case are considered, the late J. Edgar Hoover emerges as the more appropriate party to bear the label terrorist. Mr. Hoover rose to the ranks of FBI director despite not having a single day of field experience in law enforcement. In life, he was identified as a living icon. Some even referred to him as the American Jesus. In death, he was eulogized as a national symbol of courage, integrity, patriotism. In private, he was a skilled manipulator. He was a master of deception. He was controlling. He was irrational. He was unwilling to accept differing viewpoints. He had a total disregard for the United States Constitution, and he had zero tolerance for dissenters, people who opposed the Vietnam War, people who demanded equal rights for women and for minorities, people who advocated human rights. And he had a special disdain for African Americans. He thought all African Americans were dangerous. And this man wielded unchecked federal powers. Now let's examine his approach to law enforcement. The court would find that it was unconventional, to say the least. He did not allow the FBI to act in response to criminal activity. He actually created the criminal activity, and then he sent the FBI to police it. And the likes of this served as FBI director for approximately 48 years. Let's take a closer look at operations under Mr. Hoover. You might think of it as a three-step process. Step one is the FBI under Mr. Hoover's leadership would assign a label. The label might be subversive, it might be dangerous, extremist, hate group, communist, violent, revolutionary, maybe even security threat. These labels were often unwarranted. They were often not deserved. For example, in the case of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, an assembly of ministers, he affixed the label hate group. In the case of the Black Panther Party, the label greatest threat to internal security of the country was attached. Step two in J. Hoover's methodology was to then use the label as some pretext for an FBI response. For example, in the case of the Baltimore Women's Liberation Movement, they had no idea when they were meeting to plan for equality for women that they had become a target of J. Edgar Hoover. He had attached the label extremists and subversives, and then he not only opened his own file, but he also had the assistance of 3 other military agencies following these women. They were targets of multiple overlapping, prolonged investigations. The origins of the group was studied, the purpose, the pamphlets, the meeting places for years. In the end, what was determined is that these women merely wanted a purpose in life. They just wanted to be something more than wives and mothers. They wanted equal opportunities. They were not anything close to extremists. So you would imagine after the waste of resources, the end of the file would have said closed at that point, but that was not the way J. Edgar Hoover did business. The file goes on to say, and I quote, "After all of this study, we will continue to follow and report the activities of the women's liberation movement." The third step in J. Edgar Hoover's process to law and order was to fashion a neutralization response. One way of doing that was through public relations, which the world has yet to realize. He created his own public relations firm within the walls of the FBI. If he did not control the story inside the FBI, he intimidated and he investigated reporters outside of the FBI. So he had mighty power over these narratives that were released to the public. His second approach to neutralization we find best in the records that was entered into evidence today by defense counsel. That church committee report contains some important testimony from Frederick Swartz. It was sworn to the United States Congress in 1975, and he tells, after an extensive congressional investigation, some of the ways the FBI would neutralize citizens. And I am stressing that this is not just about the Black Panther Party. This was citizens in general. He explains under oath, and I quote, in addition to using the IRS, the Postal Service, the Passport Agency, the Immigration and Naturalization Services, the CIA, and of course, the customs officials. In short, the neutralization plot involved all arms of government. But it did not stop there. According to the records that were entered into evidence today, the FBI also recklessly used informants. They engaged in false arrests. They engaged in assassination plots, psychological profiling, mail tampering, instigating feuds, interfering with speeches, and illegal searches and wiretaps. They even use federal and state collaborations. And incidentally, there is evidence of this in this case against the Black Panther Party. We have Governor McKithen of Louisiana announcing early on in the organization of Louisiana's chapter that I will hit them right between the eyes. These people will never have a foothold in this community, so says the governor of Louisiana. So the court finds that the methods used upon the Black Panther Party were militaristic, draconian, excessive, inhumane, and unconstitutional. Were they a national security threat, you ask? Well, the court is relieved about having to answer that question because that work was also done by Congress. In the Committee for Internal Security of the House of Representatives, there was an extensive investigation into the Black Panther Party. Subpoenas were issued, witnesses were forced to testify, and we now have the benefit of that in the form of the gun barrel politics report that was entered into the record today. Those congressional findings were unanimous. That report is thorough. There is not a single favorable word about the Black Panther Party in that report. But what the court finds valuable today is the conclusion. And I'll quote to you what Congress said after extensively studying the Black Panther Party. The committee does not hold that the relatively small group of Black Panthers has at any time constituted a clear or present danger to the continuing functioning of the United States government or any other institute of democratic society. This is the words of Congress after an extensive study. And then they go on to say the Black Panther Party's rhetoric regarding revolutionary activity has always exceeded performance. Were they anti-police or were they violent? Conversations about the Black Panther Party, violence, and law enforcement must be approached with caution. High-ranking government officials sent the clear message through this PR campaign that the Black Panther Party was a dangerous terrorist organization. Police believed the chief law enforcement officer of this country. This undoubtedly shadowed every interaction between police and the Black Panthers, and it likely caused their responses to each other to be more instinctive than reasoned. Complicating things even further is the fact that many of the individuals who did engage in violence under the guise of being Black Panther Party members were actually government informants, causing the false attribution of their violent acts to the Black Panther Party. The best insights about the violent nature of this group who we now have on trial is again contained in the Church Committee report, which was an extensive study of the FBI after the death of J. Edgar Hoover. Now, I'm going to quote heavily from this transcript because this needs to be said directly from this record. So I'm going to start with the line of questioning. The question reads, and I'm quoting, "What we see here is the Bureau deciding not only is law enforcement an adequate neutralization tool, but that violence or the promotion of violence is an acceptable technique as a basis for doing away with objectionable groups." That is the question. The FBI answers under oath, "Well, it appears to me at this point what we see is the Black Panther Party and the United Slaves having a dispute, and the FBI is taking the concept of neutralization now one step further." It is a really good indication of outright racism on the part of the Bureau. This is under oath in the United States Congress from a member of the FBI who worked for J. Edgar Hoover. The questions continue. So when it came to Blacks, he is explaining further. The most violent kinds of techniques were accepted by the FBI. I think they proceeded with the assumption that we would sure like to be rid of both of them. They appear to have a little bit more antagonism toward the Black Panther Party, however. If they were going to have gang fights, this officer continues, if they were going to kill each other, then it appeared to be a wonderful opportunity for the Bureau to promote this. So the question, instead of acting to calm the violence, Congress is asking, in order to subside the violence, are you saying that the FBI was really inciting this violence? They were encouraging it? They were confronting it? They were causing it? Is this a fair summation of your testimony to the United States Congress? And the answer, I quote, "I think that would be a fair statement." He continues, although the claimed purposes of the Bureau's tactics were to prevent violence, some FBI tactics against the Black Panther Party were clearly intended to foster violence. And many others could reasonably have been expected to cause violence. Were they radicals? Well, not if you believe in the words of Pastor at the Reverend Joseph Putman, who was the pastor of the St. Francis de Sales Church, who stood before his congregation on September the 20th, 1970, and said, "Your platform, Black Panther Party, and your program embraces what every self-respecting man wants for himself and his people." He goes on to say, "I too believe in the very things that you believe in. That is why I welcome the free breakfast program at this church." His final remark to his congregation that morning is, the group of Black Panthers had the sufficient character to make the decision to feed the hungry, no matter the color of their skin. Were they lawless? Did they lack respect for the rule of law? There is overwhelming evidence to suggest otherwise. Where were the Black Panthers in 1967, you may wonder? They were at the United Nations. not outside being agitators, but they were there seeking status as permanent observers of United Nations meetings. Where were they in 1968, you may wonder? Well, they were back at the United Nations, this time filing a petition advancing claims of genocide. Where were they in 1970, you ask? Well, the Louisiana Panthers were being served with papers to evict them from the Desire Housing Project. A lawless person would have done something different. What they did was out of their own expense. They went into court, they sought a temporary restraining order, and they used the law to challenge the constitutionality of Louisiana's criminal trespass statute. I should note, as we talk about lawlessness, that the officers who obtained the warrant that later caused the shootout, that later caused their arrest and their stay on death row, lied to the court in Louisiana to obtain the warrant. They swore under oath that the housing authority had made such a request, and that, according to U.S. Morris, turned out to be false. Where were the Black Panther Party when the United States Congress sought their testimony as they investigated J. Edgar Hoover? Kathleen Cleaver cooperated and provided that testimony. Where was Mr. Malik Rahim in 2008? He was running for the United States Congress with the hope of joining Bobby Rush in his service there. The Panthers were charged. The Panthers were overcharged with the frequency. They faced their charges in most instances. Where were they when the United States Army and Navy needed their service? They served with great pride. I even viewed the extensive video footage from the January 6, 2021 insurrection. Tellingly, none of the Black Panther Party members were captured inside of the state capitol that day. So I have concluded my reasoning, and now I am ready to announce the verdict. Members of the Louisiana chapter of the Black Panther Party, you are hereby convicted on some of these counts, but you are exonerated on others. As to the charge of terrorism, the court finds you not guilty. The court does find you guilty of a few things, though. The court finds you guilty of being dangerous. Why? Because of 1971. That would be the year that the 26th Amendment was ratified. That would be when the 18-year-olds got the right to vote in this country. And that would be the year that President Nixon got very concerned about who would influence that vote. The Black Panther Party represented a grave departure from the pacifist approach to social change. The Black Panther Party had the ability to galvanize and to influence, and from that vantage point, the Black Panther Party was dangerous. The court finds you guilty of believing in the United States Constitution. That tells us there are checks and balances on government officials. The court finds you guilty of being victims of governmental excesses and human rights abuses. The court finds you guilty of recruiting some members whose actions would unknowingly aid the government in neutralizing the Black Panther Party. The court finds you guilty of believing in the power of the people. And lastly, the court finds you guilty of being deserving of inclusion in Black History Month commemorations and in warranting proper attribution for your profound contributions to American history around sickle cell anemia testing, awareness, and treatment, around voter education and registration, around the successful formation of multiracial coalitions, around teaching America how to be anti-racist, around police accountability, around coordinating services and empowerment of communities, and around your efforts relative to combating poverty and hopelessness in the African American community.
Wow. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ebony Cormier, and I just have been blown away today by the stories of perseverance, solidarity, and activism displayed by these incredible men and women here today. I want to leave you with an original poem by the late Herman Wallace, who was in solitary confinement for 40 years as a result of his own activism. Prior to Mr. Wallace's death, Professor Bell asked him to pen a poem. Today, we remember Herman Wallace, and we dedicate this poem to all of the men and women of steel who remain in the fight. This is Man of Steel by the late Herman Wallace. My keepers believe I'm the man of steel, ripping and running in and out of my life as if this shit ain't real. They framed me for murder, and when their conspiracy was exposed and they were all deposed, the judge declared, case closed. Equal access to justice, equal access to rule, doctrine never meant for the man of steel, but to terminate 40 years of his indomitable will. Maybe my soul is that of concrete. Maybe it is that of the wind. Maybe it is that of fire. Maybe it is the spirit of the people, the spirit of my ancestors. Whatever my keepers wish my soul to be, the man of steel has always been free. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, thank you for your service today. At this time, the trial portion of our program has concluded, and we will open up briefly for questions and answers, starting with the questions that are posted in the chat. Again, very briefly. During this segment, please share with us what thoughts you would have entertained during deliberations or that may have influenced your decision had you actually served on this jury. You are welcome to provide your questions orally or add them in the chat. Be reminded that although today's program was simulated, these type deliberations are critical if the Sixth Amendment rights are to be realized, assuring that impartial juries decide the fate of accused persons. Thank you.
Does anybody wish to share anything that you would have been influenced by had you been actually deliberating a verdict today? And if not, we're going to move on to the next segment.
Well, I have something to share. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
First of all, thank you for Judge Bell for inviting me to this incredible event, and listening to the witnesses and the arguments on both sides is really powerful. And I'm so glad that the Black Panther Party is being recognized in this way as part of the legacy that is, needs to be brought to the fore during Black History Month. I just like to say that I was very moved by the emphasis on cross-racial solidarity within the political activities and sort of values of the Black Panther Party, how this came forward from different witnesses and different arguments. And I would just like to say that I was an activist in the Bay Area at the time when the Panthers were very, significant political force there. And, I was in predominantly white organizations, and we always turned to the Panthers as really exemplars of cross-racial solidarity through their coalition building in the Peace and Freedom Party, through something that they held in the late 60s, organized called the United Front Against Fascism, and their community work. So I have had direct experience of their presence and their integrity and their commitment to cross-racial solidarity. And I just wanted to close by saying this came home to me really powerfully. I attended the 50th anniversary of the Black Panther Party in Oakland, California, and I happened to be seated next to a woman from Colorado, a Latina woman who said to me that she was the first person of her background to join the party. And she had heard about their community work in health and their free clinics all the way in Colorado. And she decided, this is what I want to, give my youth to. So she moved to Berkeley, and she was hired. She was a nurse, and she was she became involved in the first free clinic that the Panthers organized in Berkeley. So this level of their activity around healthcare was mentioned. Their activities around sickle cell anemia stands out all the more today when we are looking at and experiencing the horror of the racial disparities in terms of the impact of the pandemic and healthcare racism and intrinsic to our healthcare system. And finally, I want to say that I just viewed the film on the assassination of the Black Panther Party leader, Fred Hampton. It's a dramatization called Judas and the Black Messiah. And in that film, although it's not given as much time and space as we might like, but part of the reason that Fred Hampton, or a big reason why he was targeted, and this is well known by J. Edgar Hoover in conjunction with Chicago police, is that he was very, very active on the ground in building cross-racial connections and actions with the Young Lords Party and others, a white working class on the ground organization. He was very effective at that, and that was a great threat to the powers that be. That was what marked him really as to be assassinated as a major threat, because what he represented was, as you mentioned, Judge Bell, was really the power of the people when in solidarity across organizations to really make fundamental change in this country, that he promised, he embodied that promise. So I just want to urge anyone who hasn't had a chance to see that film, that I recommend it for that reason alone. Thanks again for inviting me.
Thank you so much for joining us. Does anybody have any additional comments? And there are also many in the chat, so please take a peek. One of the things that motivated us to do this format at the end was because we just fought so hard in Louisiana to have juries that do give equal weight to all voices. And we wanted to make sure that everyone understood the meaning of that. So you may have come here today with a certain disposition about the Black Panther Party, but the beauty of a jury is that everybody can speak their perspectives on the evidence and the facts, and ultimately, with all of us having equal weight on these juries now in Louisiana, we hope to see more fair outcomes. So when you get the subpoena for jury duty, We don't want you to run from it anymore. We fought for you to have that right to be present. And we're hoping you see just by the comments today and the testimony and the discussion and the way you leave wanting to go and look these sources up that was cited. Jury service is going to be fundamental if we're ever going to have a fair justice system. So this matters. Any additional comments that anybody wants to share, we would appreciate all comments. And speakers as well. Yes.
So we have a comment in the chat from Ms. Brittany Dunn. If she want to speak to her comment, she can do so at this time.
Well, I was just saying basically, hello everybody first, that I really enjoyed the live testimony from the Black Panther Party, the expert witness also, and his involvement with the Black Lives Matter movement. That really, hit home because it's like firsthand testimony of people who were involved when these events were taking place, who've seen the involvement of the U.S. from then to now. Even when the guy said that, it got worse, he looks at things as if it got worse. I kind of see the same thing. So all those things kind of spoke to me, and this was just really beautiful. It really touched me. Thank you.
Welcome.
This is Professor Oko, and I'm overwhelmed and quite truly amazed by what I saw today. There is hope for Black America. The prosecutor and the defense attorney, my hats off to you guys. You would go places. You carry with you the hopes of millions of Americans. I have learned one thing today. Justice is a never-ending struggle. Your job as attorneys is not just to make the money. You must show concern for the less privileged. The only thing standing between America and injustice will be people like you, the defense attorney, the prosecutor. You had a difficult task, but trust me, I believe in you. And I believe in Southern University. This should light a fire in you, and may that fire burn forever. I am emotional, I am overwhelmed. I have never seen, this is Southern at its best. I've been here for 25 years, trust me. This is as good as they come. Congratulations to everyone. And to the biased judge, I don't know why anybody would choose Professor Bell as a judge. She's so biased, but you know what? She was able to keep her bias in check and render justice. But I wouldn't have chosen her as a judge. So, prosecutor, you and I have to get together and see how we can appeal this judgment. Congratulations, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for that. You're welcome. We also had a comment from Ms. Mecca Price, if she would like to speak on her comment in the chat.
Good afternoon, everybody. So my comment was just a response to the question of whether, if I were a real jury member, some of the things I would have highlighted that were mentioned from the prosecution and defense. And so what I said was, when the defense brought the witness Woodfox, he mentioned multiracial coalitions during this time. And so I know that involved different marginalized groups in society at the time, and how it was focused on unity and kind of addressing inequality for more than just Black Americans within the community. So my question would have been whether or not these other marginalized groups received the same kind of prejudicial response as the Black Panther Party, being that they were Black Americans, and whether or not they were considered as radical or as anti-constitutional as the Black Panther Party would have been, because what it seemed from the trial was that they used the same kind of agendas to promote justice. So if they're using the same agendas are these other marginalized groups getting the same responses as the Black Panther Party is, being radical, being anti-American, being anti-constitutional. So that's one thing I wish we would have been able to talk about. But yeah, that was just a brief response to that. So.
And I appreciate you sharing that. And in the interest of time, I do want to say to everyone, if you go to the website for the FBI, there is a place on there called The Vote, and you will find the COINTELPRO documents on all of these groups, including Martin Luther King, many other African-American ministers. There's an African-American doctor in Mississippi that was terrorized because he was funding the cause of segregating pools. So to answer your question, playwrights, book authors, dance instructors, anyone that was teaching self-empowerment, advocacy, determination, demands for human rights, even if the methodology was nonviolent, even if the methodology was more subtle than the Panthers, they became a target of J. Edgar Hoover. And I do want to stress that this was not all African-American people. These were many groups who were environmental activists, war activists. These were women who were advocating for gender, because what J. Edgar Hoover envisioned was an America that was going to be governed by not just white men, but ultra-conservative white men. So anyone that didn't fit that profile became a target. So you have the COINTELPRO records you can see through The Vote. The church committee report is available online, so you can read that. That is the official findings about this J. Edgar Hoover FBI that we talked about. And by the way, there is also a phenomenal movie that will be airing for free for the next 24 hours on Martin Luther King, and it shows you the tactics that he received, and they were in no way different from what happened with the Black Panther Party. So to answer your question, they studied the individual to figure out how best to neutralize them, and then they went to work. So this Panther response was extreme, but it is not to suggest to you that responses were more subtle toward other African-American or activists. So that movie for King, if anybody wants it, Mr. West, if you can put that in the chat, the link for the movie, it is free for the next, I think 48 hours, and you definitely need to watch that.
Sorry, Judge Bell. Am I allowed to do this? Can I donate $500 to Bolsa to support whatever they want to do?
You have that option, or you also... Am
I allowed to do that?
You are allowed to do that, and I'll also remind you that the alumni chapter of the Louisiana Black Panther Party is still heavily organizing, and they also accept donations. So you are also available to do either.
I can do both. I can do 500 to Bolsa, 500 to Black Panthers.
Isn't that beautiful? Well, everybody, that's everybody. How about a power to the people for Professor Oko? Power to the people. All right. Okay. All right. We have about another minute on questions before we get to our acknowledgements. Okay. So then, is that Mr. West?
Go ahead, Professor Bell. Go.
No, sir, you go.
I think we had a comment from Miss Miss Esmond. She made a comment in the chat as well. She would like to speak.
Oh, hi, I'm here. I had a couple of comments, but and I'm not sure which one you mean, but I think with respect to the previous question about whether non-Black organizers got the same treatment as the Panthers. Of course, nobody got the same treatment as the Panthers. The white SDS leaders were persecuted badly, and they also got the J. Edgar Hoover treatment, but they were white and they were middle class mostly, and so they did not get as I said, nobody went through what Wood Fox went through. And kudos to you, Mr. Wood Fox. I say that every time I see it, and I'm going to continue to say it every time I see it, because you are a true American hero. Nobody went through what those guys went through. And of course it was because they were Black. So yes and no. Anybody who was a radical organizer caught the attention of J. Edgar Hoover, and that was not any place anybody ever wanted to be, but he had a special place in his heart for Black radicals. And we just heard that today.
Thank you for your comment. I'm going to turn it back over to Professor Bell at this moment.
And I would actually ask some representative of the chapter to respond as to how people might contact you if they want to have further communication concerning donations or official business. I think that might be, is that Malik Rahim, or is it Albert or King? Can somebody speak on that? Do they have the ability, Mr. West, to respond to us?
Yes, you have to. This is Woodbox. You can contact Malika. Malik Rahim as far as donations to the alumni.
What's the best contact information for Mr. Malik Rahim? Do we have a way of doing that? Email, phone number? How do we want to do that?
Can you hear us? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear somebody.
Oh yes, this is Trent Smith. Baba Malik's right here. I don't know what happened, but
okay.
Right here. There's a cash. We have a cash app that it's actually on my phone though, so I have to give it to you in a second. But Baba
are you able to put it in the chat for us?
Yes, I'm gonna. Yeah, let me pull it up. But
okay.
Insofar as his number and email address and everything.
Okay. And to all of you guys that came to speak today, do you have like anything you would like to say before we begin to conclude the program? You don't have to feel pressured, but do you want to say anything in response to the audience?
I would like to make a statement.
It's difficult to hear, Malik.
How about now?
We can hear you now.
And we're about to enter some very rough times. People need to remember that Black Lives Matter started under the Obama's administration. Those that felt like they have been slighted and that they are losing their superiority, they become more violent now. We need to understand this. We need to understand that we got to be able to take care of ourselves, that we have to develop mechanisms, that each one of us who have been blessed, especially with wealth, need to give back to our community. Need to make sure that any of us is never denied the right of social upliftment, not because of the government, but because of us. Because we will make sure our people is capable of social upliftment. And we can do it. We can do it. It's good that, this made my heart feel good to see the young lawyers, young African-American lawyers are standing up and doing this thing that you have done today. It did my heart good because then we know that we have some of our own that is capable of representing us. As I said, and I have nothing against white attorneys because Robert Glass and Bernstein, who worked with our case, and others did a remarkable job. But it always touched my heart when I saw Lowell Seeley, and that's what we need. We need to have individuals that stand up. And in closing, that's all I can say is to everyone. You dig it? Just stay strong in all power.
Does any other of the chapter members want to say anything before we move on to the next segment of the program? We're over time.
Yes, this is General Rico. I like to, they say give a shout out.
I'd like to give a shout out to the new Black Panther Party who have represented our alumni from day one since it was established. So all love go to Crystal Muhammad and her forces down here in the South. All power to the people. All power to the people.
All right. Any other commentary from any other speakers before we move on? So then, Kenyatta, we're ready for you.
Yes, ma'am. Hello, everyone. My name is Kenyatta Bartholomew. I'm a member of the Planning Committee. At this time, I would like to acknowledge the following members of the Planning Committee: Ms. Stacy Dukes, Ms. Christina Moore, Ms. Kiana Joy Ochiaga, Ms. Gabriela Rodriguez, Ms. Kayla Watson, Mr. Derek West, Ms. Brianna Wilson, Ms. Lucretia McAllister, and Professor Bell. And also, as a disclaimer, we just would like to reiterate that the views of the student participants should not be interpreted as their own. They were shared in the interest of facilitating an academic discussion. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stacy Dukes, and I'm the Vice President of the Black Law Students Association, Southern University Law Center chapter. Today's program was a true demonstration of what the National Black Law Students Association represents. Our mission is to articulate and promote the needs and goals of Black law students and to effectuate change in the legal community. As future lawyer leaders, it is our responsibility to use the privilege of our legal education to ensure that our community is aware of the activities and debates of democratic institutions and that those institutions are aware of the viewpoints of our community. We must also connect Black citizens with the legal services necessary to make the courts accessible to them. In these ways, we strengthen our democracy, making it more accessible and meaningful for our people. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, thank you for your service today. As members of the community, particularly the Black community, it is absolutely imperative that we recognize that juries are an integral part of our justice system. There is perhaps no arena of public life or governmental administration where racial discrimination is more widespread, apparent, and seemingly tolerated than in the selection of juries. Nearly 135 years after Congress enacted the 1875 Civil Rights Act to eliminate racially discriminatory jury selection, the practice continues. The underrepresentation and exclusion of people of color from juries has seriously undermined the credibility and reliability of the criminal justice system, and there is an urgent need to eliminate this practice. Finally, while our message today was delivered in a creative way, we hope that the conversation does not end here, but that we have inspired you to always seek truth and to not allow others to write our narrative so that we decide whether someone is a hero or not a hero. And we do that based on facts and analysis. Again, we'd like to thank the members of the Louisiana Alumni Chapter of the Black Panther Party for sharing your stories and allowing us to hear the facts as they should be recorded in the history books. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, please raise your right fist and repeat after me as we conclude. All power to the people. Thank you.
All power to the people.
All power to the people. Yes, this was so beautiful. Thank you so much.
I'm still reading comments, but we have concluded our program, so everybody's free to leave. And thank you for joining us today.